Good afternoon. This is your Pan-African show called Afreeqa. We have a great guest for you today. We've actually gone out a little out of our normal conversation. If you could please introduce yourself.
My name is Hiwot Amare. I am the co-founder and executive director of a local NGO called Nutrition for Education and Development.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming and having this conversation with us.
Thank you for having me.
Please tell us who you are and your journey up to the beginning of your NGO.
I am a young woman still young, I hope, from Addis Ababa. I was born and raised here. I went to Lycée Gabra Mariam as a student. I then went to France to study higher education. I went to study IT. So management and information systems. I am now a wife and a mother of two beautiful children, a girl of 12 and a boy of 9. So until the day I decided to create the local NGO I told you about, I've always had a side life of volunteerism, community involvement, and that started when I was 15 years old. We were a group of girls in my high school, so in Lycée. We were discussing how we could do something about the people we see in the streets and how we can support from our capacity, how we can bring something to the society. So we had this very motivated friend of mine called Fikr. So she gave us this idea that we can create a Welfare by Teenagers Association. So that's the very first NGO we created. We were, I think, 12 members at the beginning. We started by asking money from our parents, our aunts. So back then, 10 birr was a big deal. So from each of them, we took like 20, 30 birr, and we had our first contribution. So we did activities such as support in orphanages. We went to wash clothes, paint the beds, play with the kids, things like that. Then we did festivals in our school to collect clothes and other materials that we can support street children with it. And from there, for the 3 years we were still in school, until our 18 years birthday, we were able to do such activities that I think ignited something in me that this is something I wanted to do in my life. So even then, after that, once I went to France to study with this kind of same group, almost, more or less same people. We created another organization there to support Ethiopian children coming to study there and also to let people know about Ethiopia and our culture. From there, then we created another association with my husband to support children to go to school in a decent manner, with a school bag, with the clothes, with the food that is required for a child to go to school normally. So like a sponsorship program that actually still exists and has enabled one person to finish university, another one finish from a diploma, and others are still in high school. So that's the way it continued. And even in France, I used to volunteer in a homeless shelter where there are men. It was a men shelter actually, so who lived in the streets to come, take their shower, food, etc. So our work was to talk with them, to assist them when they were eating, stuff like that. So it's something that was in me,
obviously,
all my life almost. But as I grew up, I think as I matured, it became more and more frustrating for me to do this. I think after I became a mom, it started to become more and more frustrating for me to do this as a side thing. Like I couldn't allocate most of my time to this thing that was my passion, apparently. So I think that's how kind of when I came to create this NGO.
Wow, we have a very interesting journey. And obviously something while you were in Ethiopia ignited that. Because at 15, to be able to start thinking for other people in itself is a big achievement. So I have to say bravo.
Thank you.
Now, you studied IT.
Yes.
How did you go from IT into the nutrition and development sector?
Very good question. Well, I to explain it in a simple way, I mostly say IT is my brain work and this one is my heart work. So it's until now I haven't connected it. There are many ways it can get connected, but I haven't connected it yet. But I've always been a science person. I loved maths. I actually studied maths first before going to IT. But that was like something that really demanded a lot of my energy. And when I was saying earlier how it frustrated me to not to do this as a main thing, the passion I had about community work, it's because the IT world is demanding. It's, as you know, like everything is becoming that. And when I was working in France, I was so involved in my work that I felt like the more I would do it, the more I would go in my career, the less I could do the community work I would. So I think that's also how it transitioned. Then why I chose nutrition actually has nothing to do with IT. It has more to do with the fact that I became a mom. And I realized, oh my God, that's a huge thing to work on. Actually, everybody laughs because I work in nutrition and I don't like cooking. So I don't like cooking, my husband neither. So both of us, we were just eating what we could, to just feed ourselves, but never had to focus on nutrition before we became parents. And then when I was pregnant and my child was born in quite a complicated situation where it's thanks to some information I had in a book, we were able to deliver her and safely, actually. Her life was in danger. So all that made me realize that she needed a lot of breast milk, a lot of good food to grow because she was a premature because of that. So to come to her normal self, to develop properly. And while I was reading that, I learned a lot of things, actually, just because I had access to information, to books, to internet and stuff like that. I was able to raise my child in a proper way. And it ignited something in me saying, imagine all those people who don't have information.
Right.
Yeah. So that's how it came to that.
So then, of course, the next question would be, why did you think it was important to start your NGO?
So as I was saying, I was involved in community work from very young age, and I always felt overwhelmed by the need, to be honest. Like when you work on this, you feel like you're abandoning another thing. And even if you do that, you feel like you're just putting stitches and, Band-Aids on problems that's already there and visible to everybody. And I felt like we needed to work on the source of our problem somehow. So as I told you, after I had my first child, my daughter, and this realization I had about importance of information, about importance of nutrition and all, when I was pregnant of my second child, I had more time at home because I had taken some months to stay with him. And I started reading and I started documenting myself about public health. So as I come from another sector, I had no idea about public health. And I learned a lot about the effects of malnutrition and in an angle that I never knew about. Because most of us, actually myself, before I used to think malnutrition is more hunger. And it's not just that. And hunger, there's also what we call hunger because the lack of food. Yeah. But there's hunger that's because you don't have all the nutrients that you need to develop properly. And that's what they call hidden hunger. And when I learned about that and the impact it has on the development of children, so the development of a human being, I always say, like, our power as a country, as a continent, is our people. Right. So if we don't invest on the people, then what do we have, And our demographic is growing so much, like it's a powerhouse of what Africa could be for the whole world, And so by investing on our children, on the development of our human capital, I think we can do so much for the world. And that's how I connected it.
What is nutrition for education and development?
Our organization, so it's created since 2016. It focuses on urban marginalized communities. Why? Because the need is everywhere anyway. So we thought maybe urban marginalized communities a little bit forgotten because we focus a lot on the rural part, especially when it comes to nutrition, because that's where there's also lack of. But the urban marginalized communities come from a very diverse places. They're local migrants coming from other regions, living together without access to the rest of the city. Mostly they come with a dream that's not necessarily fulfilled. They lose their land, they lose their family, they lose so much from where they come from, being here and living together, and they find themselves in a very vulnerable situation. So we thought it could be something we can specialize on. we focus on 4 main activities or programs. The first one is education on everything that's related to nutrition and health, especially regarding children and mothers. So that comes from what I was explaining earlier, why it's important, how they can access it easily from where they live, and trying to break the cliche of nutrition is for rich people. Trying to explain that, from whatever you can get from the local market, how you can prepare a very nutritious food for yourself, for your child, and why it's actually crucial to do that, especially when you have a lot of money. Why it's important to focus on it so that you utilize your resources in the best manner possible. So most of our work is education of parents, especially mothers. Then we have early childhood development empowerment part, where we focus on, we have fed the body, but what do we do about the cognitive development and how we prepare these kids to go to school in a proper manner? Do they have access to food when they're in primary school? And all that to make sure that throughout their development process, they are being catered to or taken care of so that their development is really full. So because early childhood development focuses on health and nutrition, what we're doing already, but also on early stimulation, responsive care, and their safety and security, which is also a very important chapter. So this is the second program. Then there's a third program we call Women Economic Empowerment. So that evolves around giving the women opportunity so that they can also bring income to the household, to be independent. But also in this economy, I think it's important both household members are able to bring something to the table so that they have sufficient for themselves, their children. So we work on saving programs, loan programs, entrepreneurship programs, so that they are able to provide for themselves. And the fourth and last program is what we call social empowerment. So that's a little bit englobes everything. It's because it talks about life skill first. It talks about gender equality. It talks about gender-based violence and how to prevent it, and also how to provide support when how it happens. So it can be gender-based violence at the home, but also outside. So think of it like this way, we give tools so that the approach is holistic. If they have the money, but they don't know what to do with it, doesn't make sense. Right. If they know what to do with it, they have the money, but they don't feel safe enough or okay in their mind to do what we have taught them, it doesn't work. So we try to connect the things so that these households are fully empowered and able to utilize what we teach them.
You mentioned the vulnerable households around Addis Ababa, and one of my questions was, how do you actually find these vulnerable households?
Okay, so a very good question, because that was my question first. When I wanted to start the organization, I'm like, okay, how am I going to find these people? So the first time, but that's not the mainstream way we do work, just for the anecdotic story. I did 1 month volunteering with another organization that works on nutrition when I was still thinking of creating this organization.
Here in Ethiopia?
Here in Ethiopia. I came here for 1 month, put my kids to daycare, and went to volunteer. And the country director in that organization said, come, let me show you something. And he took me to the north of Addis in Toto area and showed me these areas. You would be so surprised we're still in Addis Ababa. So the gap between the Addis people know and the Addis there is so different. Wow. The type of households, the way the people live, the fact that they don't even really have electricity in the normal manner. They have they're pulling electricity from different areas to get it. So we first started there. So my first needs assessment and conversation with the community, that's where it happened. And our first project happened in that Wereda also. 1 or 2 years later when we really started working. Then now, in a mainstream way, because we're more organized and we're an official organization, we do work a lot with the local authorities. So first, in Ethiopia anyway, when you want to do any development or charity work, you have to go through a process. And that process gives you a lot of documents that you can use to go to Weredas and tell them, I'm here to do this and this work. I have from data or different information heard that in this area, there are people who may need support. Can you please help me identify the households? So the Women, Children and Social Affairs Office of the Warada, in collaboration in our case, because we do work on pregnant ladies, in collaboration with the Public Health Center, the ጤና ጣቢያ, they collaborate to provide us with the list of people who are pregnant. I mean, the list of women who are pregnant and at the same time economically vulnerable, so that we can work on them.
When you mentioned pregnant women, as you've noticed throughout Addis Ababa, on the streets of Addis Ababa, there are a lot of young girls with babies. Now, is there anything that you could do for them? Does that also encompass what you are doing? Or do they have to actually have a house and they're like under a warada and so on and so forth? Can you help homeless women?
In our programs, we don't have homeless programs because actually that's a choice because we have to have a scope. I believe it's a completely another work. Of course, women in those areas need the education that we give, need the economic empowerment. So all this program, but in another establishment like a rehabilitation center that needs to welcome them, to give them a stable situation and then provide this, because the fact that they live on the streets or, by the way, not everybody that you see in the streets lives on the streets.
Lives on the streets.
Yes, that's also another, completely another topic, but you know what I mean. So we have had the opportunity to work with such women, but who have a house to live in. Okay. So especially in the Ntoto area I told you about, there is actually a whole warada with many of the people that you see in the streets. But there are also those who really do live in the streets, and that's a whole another program that is required for them. But so what we do, actually, to try to reach to them, and actually others that we cannot reach with our programs, is what we call a satellite program. So we have the manuals, the education program, everything, the information that is required for all these people in our database, and we have it. And sometimes we feel frustrated because when you do the kind of work that we do, where you go to teach people, and it's not a one-shot teaching, we stay with them over 15 months. So it's a long program. So you cannot reach thousands at once in that manner. You know what I mean, right? So what we created satellite program just for that, because we thought, but there are so many other people who need this information. So we cannot reach out to them in this sustainable manner, in a very long manner. So we collaborate with other NGOs who actually happen to work also with street women and children, but not only, actually. There are also one that works in the Koshe area with the community who work on, live out of the garbage thing, but also the street ones. So we send a volunteer who has our program in mind and goes there regularly when it's possible every month, when it's not possible every 3 months, to go teach those people who are there, but knowing that there's no stability. We don't know if the next time you go there, we find the same person. So it's not at all the same kind of program, I might say.
You did say it's not a short period. You have a long period of time where you educate them and do stuff. But then, let's say it's a year, and then you leave. Would they be able to sustain themselves with what you actually provided?
Very good question. Because that's how our organization grew. We follow the people and their needs, because when we first started, it was just the education part and saving and micro loan part. Throughout the years, when we were finishing those programs, not all, okay, we have to get out of the illusion that every person that we teach is going to perfectly implement what I have come to learn that in a hard way, but now I accept it, that you cannot, the investment you do on people will not be taken and utilized in the way you have wanted in the first place. But I think that's okay. There are people who are able to go to the next step. So now, when I talked about, I described it very shortly, our economic empowerment part, but it has actually 3 levels. Okay. It has a level where the person is very intrigued about the concept of saving. So that's level 1. So we take the people that are no, I cannot save 10 birr per month, to making them, throughout the first program of 15 months, or 1 year and a half approximately, we take them to a state there okay, I can save, I can take micro loans, I am an independent person, and I want to be an independent person. I am not yet. So that's level 1.
Okay, just the fact that you are even teaching them the I can part in itself is a struggle.
It's a struggle, but that's the beginning of sustainability. Yeah. Because if you don't work on the, The problem here is like we've been, I know it's like paradoxical to say that, although I have an NGO, but the NGO world and the development and the charity system in Ethiopia had made people be so dependent on aid. And one of our values as an organization is no aid. Because I know it's an NGO, but at the same time, we do not believe in handouts at all. And I think that's what kills our people. That's what has killed the generation. So the first thing we tell them when we get there, say, if you're expecting macaroni, oil, flour, just don't stay with us. That's not the point. You're going to waste your time. So that's our introduction program is that. So from there, those who stick with us, some of them leave, some of them stay, and some of them call their friends saying, oh, come, there is a different kind of organization teaching us actually something and not just giving us money, making us sign something and leave, So it does attract some, but some are not okay with that, so they leave. So level 1, that's why it's long-term period, because there is a lot of work on the mentality change. Then there is level 2, where we go in the formal entrepreneurship world, where they create their businesses. And that's not finished. Then there's level 3, where we try to sustain the enterprises. So that part is a little bit less efforts on our side, more complex work, because we have to link them with markets, make sure that they sustain their business. But that's more of a follow-up program, because it's also too illusionary or too optimistic to think that just because you gave just starting capital to someone, they're just going to kick and become the most successful entrepreneur.
Perfect. What is your mission, vision, and your values?
Our vision is through investing on nutrition to create a generation that's fully developed and that's capable to become the human capital to the country and to the continent and to the world, so that our children get what they eat.
What they need.
Yes. Yeah. So to make that happen, our missions are 2 big missions, I would say. The first one is, that I was saying earlier, is to empower households through knowledge, self-confidence, income, so that they can provide for themselves and know what to do with that income to create that kind of family that we hope for. And our second mission is to provide the tools that these families need in a sustainable manner so that they don't need us anymore. So to make sure that they don't need such organizations, they don't need anyone to address their needs. To make that happen, so we base ourselves on 3 main values. So obviously we have the values such as honesty, transparency, and so on and so forth that go directly with the kind of work that we do, respect also of the community. But like, as I was saying earlier, we do not believe in aid, and we think aid has done so much brought so much problem to our community. I just need to precise here, I'm not talking about aid in the context of emergency, obviously,
right.
Okay? Because there are cases in war or a natural disaster
where you do need it, yeah.
It is important. But I'm talking about in the development work, I think we have to disconnect people with aid mentality to make them less dependent. So that's one of our main values. Everything that we do, sometimes it's hard to decide that way, but we do stick with that. The second one is to make sure that what we do brings back to the community. Because to do the work that we do, we need the science, we need the policy, we need so many things. And we believe that our power and our work is to bring that to the community in a way that the community understands it in the way that they need it. So that's our second value. It's to always stay connected with the community and to stay as grassroots as possible. And the last one is, as much as possible, act preventively. As I said earlier, maybe I didn't develop enough on that, but nutrition, especially the chronic malnutrition and the hidden hunger that we're talking about, once the damage is done, it's not something we can take back.
It's not reversible.
It's not reversible. So when the person, the baby or even the fetus, because it starts before even the baby is born, has lacked the essential nutrients in their early ages and haven't received that in the first 2 years of their life, including when they're a fetus, the problem that creates in their brain, physical and immunity development is so bad that we cannot go back. So the more preventively we work, the more result we can bring. But so we apply that on everything that we do. It can be in violence and anything that we work. We try to act as preventively as possible.
So basically, the main thing is malnutrition.
Yes.
So you're trying to get to these children or to these babies before the damage is done.
Exactly.
So our conversation really is about nutrition and malnutrition, right?
The center part is that.
Exactly.
Everything that comes with it to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yes. So I'm going to be asking a few questions about malnutrition in itself, because I think we as mothers need to understand what malnutrition is to even understand what nutrition to give.
Exactly.
You know, so my question is, what is chronic malnutrition?
To explain chronic malnutrition in comparison to the malnutrition that most of us understand, which is acute malnutrition, is a type of malnutrition that happens in a long time. Okay, it's recurrent. So acute malnutrition is you don't receive food, or you have had a disease that made you lose whatever nutrient you have in yourself. So it happens in a short period of time, and it can be deadly actually, or heal. Chronic malnutrition, it can happen actually from the mother even before she's pregnant. Then she passes on to her child because she doesn't provide to the child the right nutrients. Then the child is born from the period that they have access to food, they don't get the right nutrients. So throughout those years, they're lacking what they need to develop properly. And to give you very surprising examples, most of our organs are produced when we're in the body of our mother's womb at very early stage, like hearing capacity, so many things in weeks after pregnancy started. So which means that if the mother is malnourished, then it's not hereditary, but it becomes almost hereditary. The fact that she's malnourished, she passes on to her child because she's not having. So that's the kind of malnutrition that's called chronic malnutrition. It happens in a long period of time, and it's not reversible. Differently to the acute malnutrition, it's not reversible. It's not something they say, okay, now at 3 years old, the child gets what they need, so they're going to get back the development. No. Actually, it's measured by height against age. So that's why, I don't know if you noticed, when we have kids, we have this graph on which we have to put the weight, the height, and the head circumference of the child. And that's actually used to know if the child has acute malnutrition or chronic malnutrition or other types of malnutrition. Actually, it's called also undernutrition, so it's globalized everything. So when they have chronic malnutrition, they're too short for their age. Okay? That's how you see it. And what does that mean? Because at the end of the day, being short in size, it's okay. I mean,
I know,
right?
You don't want to confuse it with malnutrition.
Yes, but actually that's a sign that the height didn't go as high as it could at that age because everything has been less developed than it could. You see what I mean? So that size shortage, it's the same thing happening inside the organs. The brain development, everything has developed less than it could. So the bone is not as strong as it could. So as an adult, you cannot do the same efficient work as someone else could do it. Wow. You're more vulnerable to diseases, non-communicable diseases such as diabetes, high pressure, stuff like that. The cognitive development, so your capacity of analysis, being focused, being waken up enough to be in class. And as I was saying, also mothers who are have gone through this, so girls who have had chronic malnutrition when they become mothers, first they are more vulnerable to lose their life during delivery because their pelvis is smaller, so they have a hard time delivering. And as I was saying, they also pass on their malnutrition to their children because they don't have the right nutrients themselves. So it's a kind of disaster.
Wow. So it really depends on where the mother is when she thinks of getting pregnant or when she becomes pregnant.
Exactly.
So we have to immediately change our lifestyle once we find out that we are pregnant.
Exactly. Even before normally.
Or even before.
If possible, it's before, especially for mothers who haven't had an easy life or have been through a life with marginalized communities. They have to have the nutrients they need when they think of being pregnant because they have to get the right nutrients at that time. But I know it's hard to make it happen.
It is, because as we all know, we never get pregnant when we want to get pregnant. It's always, oops, think I'm pregnant.
And you don't consult.
Exactly.
Nobody consults. And so there are programs. We do not work on that yet, but other organizations that I know work on malnutrition, they do work on teenagers to just make that happen at the proper time so that when they become mothers, they don't have that problem.
Now that we've talked about chronic malnutrition, what is malnutrition's burden and what are your solutions?